Welcome back, my YouTubers. So, for all my 7th graders that are now studying pre-algebra, simplify the following expression. Now, this is our first video of the 2nd semester, and like I said, for my 7th graders that are studying pre-algebra, we have to simplify an expression like this. Now, a simplified expression equals this expression, but it's just not as long as this expression. Right now, we have 4 terms. We have negative 2500x, that's one term. It's separated by a minus sign, the second term, which is this 3. Now this 3, you can actually consider it a negative 3. Then we have 2 other terms. We have 1 and 5/10 x, separated by this other term with this plus sign, and this last term is a 1 and 4/10. We have to be able to simplify expressions. Now, we've learned a couple of different ways to simplify expressions. The first way we've learned is called the distributive property of multiplication. Now, I know you're probably thinking, yeah, but the distributive property means to pass out. And we have to pass out numbers by multiplying them. And I don't see a number here outside of this parenthesis to multiply inside to these terms inside. And I don't see any numbers outside of this parenthesis. But there are actually numbers. There's actually a 1 right here. Now, the reason why you really don't want to use the distributive property of multiplication here is because it's really a waste of your time. 1 times this negative 2500x, well, that's just going to give you a negative 2500x. So you don't really want to take the time to go ahead and multiply 1 and this term, because you'll get back negative 2500x. Now, you'll notice I didn't write the 0 anymore because we really don't need the 0 if we're going to simplify. Again, if you multiplied 1 by this negative 3, well, that's just going to give you back negative 3. Anything you multiply by 1 will just give you back the number that you multiplied by 1. So this term times 1 will give you back the original term. This negative 3 term, if you multiply it by 1, will give you back this constant negative 3. Now, I'm mentioning words that you should already know, like constant. Constants are numbers that don't have a variable, and this doesn't have a variable x. Now, you're probably thinking, well, what about this other parenthesis? Is there a 1? Yeah. But unfortunately, it's not just a 1. It's actually a negative 1 that's being multiplied by these 2 terms. So I'm actually going to multiply negative 1 by 1 and 5/10 x, plus I'm going to multiply this negative 1 by 1 and 4/10. So this 1 and this 4/10 here also needs to be multiplied. A lot of my students in the past, I've seen them draw these arrows. And obviously a lot of 6th grade teachers, they love to draw these arrows when they're first going over the distributive property. And it reminds the student, well, you want to multiply this outside term by everything inside. So when you draw these arrows, it's a reminder. Yes, you need to multiply negative 1 by 1 and 5/10 x, but you also need to multiply negative 1 by 1 and 4/10. Well, let's use our rules for multiplying positive and negative numbers here. A negative times a positive, if 1 is negative and 1 is positive, you always get a negative product. So that's going to be negative 1 and 5/10 x. This is going to go ahead right here and give you a negative 1 and 4/10. Now this term doesn't have any variable. So what term would it be like? Well, right now it would be like this term. They're not like each other because they're both negatives. They're like each other because they both don't have a variable. In order for something to be a like term, it has to have the same variable with the same exponent. Since this term and this term, they both don't have any variables, they're like each other. They both don't have a variable or an exponent, so at this point, we can combine them. So now we're going to combine them. Now the word combine in math means one thing, add them. We can now add these terms together. Well, if you add a negative 3 to a negative 1 and 4/10, you're going to get, okay, a negative 4 and 4/10. But I'm going to put boxes around something else that are like each other. These two terms are also like each other because they have the same exact variable and their variables have the same exact exponent. So that means these two terms need to be combined. Well, if we combine them properly, we're going to get a negative 1 75/100 x. Now I'm going to put a box around this answer because this is actually the simplified expression. This expression is the same thing as the expression you started with. They're both equal. They're equivalent. Which one is simpler and simplified? Well, it's this one here. You can think about simplified in a lot of different ways, but think about what's shorter, what's easier to write. If this expression is the same as this expression, they both equal the same thing, but this one's shorter and simpler to write, well then this is the simplified expression. I want to go ahead and remind you that this number in front of this variable x is called a coefficient. A coefficient is a number that you multiply by a variable. Now I know a lot of my students want to ask me, Mr. Gonzalez, should I put a multiplication dot right there? Should I put that multiplication sign right there between the coefficient and the variable? No, actually, you shouldn't. It's simplified if you don't put that multiplication symbol. See, whenever you put a number in front of a variable and there's nothing separating the coefficient and the variable, it's already known. Everyone already knows in math, oh, they're already multiplying each other. Now, I want to use one more simplifying expression, and I want to teach you guys something called evaluating expressions, what we've also started this week. And I want to take it from your homework. So all of these problems that I'm doing, you'll find this one in the packet that's due on Wednesday, January the 30th. So let me go ahead and simplify another expression with you. And of course, like I said, I'm taking this from your homework that's due on Wednesday, and it's due on January the 30th next week. So let me go ahead and write this one down. We're going to simplify the expression that I'm going to write down. And this one comes straight from your homework. It says 6 3/10 c minus 2 times the quantity 1 5/10 c plus 4 1/10. Now, this is a little bit more obvious that there's a term outside of this parenthesis that needs to be multiplied. Once again, I want to remind you, we've been learning about the distributive property. Distribute means to pass out, and it's called the distributive property of multiplication. Well, what are you going to pass out exactly? This term right here, outside of this parenthesis, is going to be passed out. And how are you passing it out? By multiplying it. And here's what you need to multiply this negative 2 by. You need to multiply it by 1 5/10 c. So I'm going to multiply negative 2 and 1 5/10 c. Now, I also need to pass out the negative 2 and multiply it by 4 1/10. So I'm going to multiply negative 2 times 4 1/10. Now, I know you're probably thinking, well, what about that 6 3/10 c? What should I do with it? Well, you'd like to combine it with something else that has a variable c. But should you multiply right here, or should you start adding first if you're using the order of operations? Well, the order of operations says that you should always multiply before you start adding. So let me multiply and get negative 3c, and let me get negative 8 2/10. Well, which one of these terms looks like 6 3/10 c? Well, there's only one variable, c, and there's only one coefficient that has the same variable, the negative 3. So these are the terms that need to be added together. You need to add the negative 3c right here. You're allowed to combine them, and in mathematics, combining means to add if they're like each other. So we're going to add 6 3/10 c to a negative 3c. Well, that's going to give you a positive 3 3/10 c. Now, we can't combine this 8 2/10 to anything that has a variable c, because this is called a constant. It doesn't have a variable. So we're just going to write minus 8 2/10 c. I'm sorry, no c. No c. Sorry about that, guys. No variable c. Now, because it doesn't have a variable c, I'm not allowed to subtract it from the 3 3/10 c. But, Mr. Gonzalez, I mean, I don't understand, like, when would I actually use this then? If I can't subtract this from 3 3/10 c, when would I use this? Like, how am I actually going to get like an actual answer, like a numerical value? Well, that's why we actually started learning evaluating expressions. So we're going to evaluate 3 3/10 c minus 8 2/10. See, we're going to subtract something from this value here. But first I have to tell you, well, c actually equals a number. Well, let's say that c is actually equal to a number. Now this c, this could be the number of cabbages that are inside of a farm. This c could be the number of children that are riding on a bus. This c could be equal to a lot of different things. But in order to actually compute what 3 3/10 times c minus 8 2/10 is, I have to be able to give you a value for c. When you get a value for c, you can now perform something called evaluating. Here's how you evaluate. You take out the variable c and you replace it with the number 2. Now, since this 3 3/10 is called a coefficient, it's in front of the variable, this coefficient has a definition. It's a number multiplied by a variable. So this doesn't actually turn into 3 32/100ths. No, see, you can't just slap the 2 onto the back of this 3 3/10. You actually have to multiply it as 2 times 3 3/10. This is what you have to do. You multiply the coefficient and this variable. And now I'm telling you that this variable is like, there's 2 cabbages that are on a farm. And maybe we need to go ahead and multiply the 2 cabbages by the quantity of 3 3/10. Or maybe there's 2 children that are taking field trips on a bus. And now I need to multiply the number of children by 3 3/10. Well, this is going to give me 6 6/10. Now I could subtract my 8 2/10. You see, because now they're both like each other. Well, this is going to give you a negative value of 1 6/10. When you evaluate, you can now see, oh, we simplify an expression to get a simplified, smaller, shorter expression. And instead of using this long expression and saying, well, okay, c equals 2, let me replace 2 here, let me replace 2 here, it's going to take you a lot longer to go ahead and replace 2 here, replace 2 here. Then you can get this answer, but it's shorter to use this expression. And when you replace c with the number 2, you get negative 1 6/10 quicker. If you replace the c with 2 and the c with 2, you'll get all of this to turn into negative 1 6/10. But it's going to take longer to get that answer from this expression. Its shorter and simplified expression will give you the answer quicker when c equals 2. So let me go ahead and say how you'd say it in math. When you evaluate 3 3/10 c minus 8 2/10, if c equals 2, this expression equals negative 1 6/10. Now, I know a lot of you guys probably get annoyed that I don't let you say negative 1.6. This is negative 1 6/10. This 6 is in the 10th spot. I want you guys to go ahead and try to evaluate another expression. Or, you know what? Let's use this expression. And let me give you another value for c. I want you guys to go ahead and use the value c is equal to 3. If c is equal to 3, what would this expression be equal to? Take out a scratch piece of paper. Write down this expression. Pause the video and replace c with 3. Then when you're done, unpause the video and check your answer with me. I'm not going anywhere. I'll wait for you guys. Okay guys, so what I'm hoping you did is that you've unpaused the video now. And now you're going to check to see if c equals 3, what does this expression 3 and 3/10 times c minus 8 and 2/10 give you? Well, first thing you have to do is you have to take the c and replace it with the number 3. Now we're going to go ahead and use the coefficient 3 and 3/10. We're going to multiply 3 and 3/10 by 3. Well, this is going to give you 9 and 9/10. Now this doesn't have a variable, and you can subtract 8 and 2/10 from 9 and 9/10 because they both don't have variables. They have a special name when they don't have a variable. These terms are called constants. Well, you should be able to get a positive 1 and 7/10. And hopefully that's what you got. We're going to be studying this a heck of a lot more when we get back to class on Monday. And like I said, these problems right here, they come from your homework packet that's due on Wednesday, January the 30th. For our first YouTube video of the second semester, this is Mr. Gonzalez. And of course, it's always good to see you guys in class on Monday. You guys take care, and there'll be some more YouTube videos this semester. Bye-bye.